what's gone on in Florida, a little bit about charter schools. And now we're going to hear about vouchers and tax credits from Leslie Hiner, who is the Vice President of Programs and State Relations for the Freedman Foundation for Educational Choice. She has an impressive bio, which you can read once again, including some legislative and legal work. She's also a founding member of the Irvington Community Charter School in Indiana, an adjunct professor at the University of Indianapolis School of Business, and she actually taught second and third grade, or students, I should say, in Kalmar, Sweden. So with that, thank you very much for your patience, and Leslie Hiner.
Good morning, everyone. First, I'd like to thank each of you for being here. It's a beautiful morning in Kansas City. I'd also like to thank the Kansas Policy Institute for bringing us all together. It occurs to me that surely, if all of us who are well-intentioned individuals who want to make a difference in the lives of our children, if we have any hope of being successful at any of this, the first step is for us to communicate. That is the most important thing that we can do to actually make a difference and to ensure that, in fact, there will be action, there will be opportunity, and we'll be able to be successful. So I might encourage each of you that when you leave here today, you're going to go home with an awful lot of information. It's a lot to take in for one day. But I would ask each of you to call 10 of your friends and tell them what you learned today. Give them some of the information you learned, even if it's just websites from all of the different speakers today. And then ask them to call 10 of their friends and to talk about this and to get people in Kansas talking to each other in a quality way and in a way that is designed truly for the best interests of the children of the state. For good people to stand up, do the right thing, take action, and create some real opportunities for your children. So the Freedman Foundation for Educational Choice, and our website is edchoice.org. You'll find on our website an awful lot of publications, research, much of which is not done by us, but rather is done by other groups, Harvard University, Manhattan Institute, Stanford, etc. But we gather together all of that information in one place so that you can access the facts and the data that are produced by great scholars. At the Freedman Foundation, we were founded by Dr. Milton Friedman, Nobel laureate economist, and his wife, Rose. Now, Dr. Friedman, during his lifetime, he was a pretty smart guy. Presidents, governors, heads of state would contact him frequently to ask for his economic advice. And during the 1950s, he was contacted and asked to take a look at education funding. Now, keep in mind that at that time, the U.S. Department of Education was not really a factor. It was under the Carter administration that the Federal Department of Education, as we know it today, was first started. It's relatively a new creation. So Dr. Friedman took a look at the funding of education at the state and local level. Well, he was quite surprised at what he found. And he discovered that the model for funding of education looked a lot more like a socialist model than a free market model. And you consider it this way. He found that the state acquires taxpayer dollars, then keeps those dollars, creates schools, then mandates where you will send your child to school based on where you live, based on your zip code. And that is your option for the public funding of education. Well, there's nothing about that that looks like a free market society. And so his conclusion after taking a look at that was very simply that if that kind of model were left to continue over time, that the result would be mediocrity. It would be mediocrity in education. And that is what spurred him on to found our foundation to advocate this vision of school choice for all children, putting power into the hands of parents. And I will show you, it was back in 1955 where, this is where it all began. In 1955, Dr. Friedman, after doing this research, wrote an article and very simply advocated that the funding of education, which we as citizens and taxpayers, we have all agreed, and in every state it's the same, that education is vital to our society, it's vital for our liberty and our freedom and our way of life, and so we as citizens have agreed in our constitutions that we will fund that education. However, there's no reason that then the government should actually operate the schools, but most particularly that that's the only choice for the public funding of education. So in Dr. Friedman's view...
Do you have this available in handouts?
We will, yes. Yes, thank you. But his view was it was very simply this, that fund education, help our kids, that's great. But parents really are in the best position to know what their children need. And for any of you who may be a parent in this room, you will understand that maybe one of your children has a certain learning style. Maybe your other child learns in a completely different way. I have a boy and a girl, totally different learning styles. So that came home to me very personally as my children were growing up, that they had very different needs, and they went to different schools, and that worked. Now, the fundamental foundational points to school choice are very simply that decoupling the funding from the operation of the schools, well, it makes sense. It fits within a free market economy. That competition between schools will also enhance the opportunity for more effective schools, more motivational schools, more challenging schools, and in fact, that's what we've seen across the country. That it's the parents who should have this freedom to choose the right school for their children. And finally, that this opportunity for learning, that's fundamental for any child to then grow up and become a successful adult and to have that sense of real freedom and personal liberty. A well-educated citizenry is necessary for the preservation of liberty. So it just makes sense, frankly, that we do everything in our power to make sure that that happens, including providing all of the opportunities that may be available for a child to learn. Okay, now for a little bit of difficult news. There's a study done recently out of Harvard by Dr. Paul Peterson and a couple of his other associates called Globally Challenged. And we will have the website available also so that you can access this study. They just released it just here this past month. And they took a look at the international studies and comparisons. And very specifically, when doing these studies, they always look at math and reading as key indicators. But more and more people realize that it's that math piece, that if a child is getting math and is learning at, in fact, grade level, then that opens up opportunities for understanding. It's a way of thinking, a way of critical thinking that allows a child to excel in other subjects as well. So 40% of students in this class of 2011 were proficient in math. Now, that's only 40%. Means an awful lot of kids in Kansas are not proficient in math. They are not at grade level. To make matters worse, you take a look internationally and how our kids compare. 75% of students in Shanghai are in fact proficient at math. It begs a lot of questions. There are students in 16 countries that outperform the students here in Kansas. There are students in 5 states who outperform the students in Kansas. Now, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that, first of all, we're not stacking up very well as the academic achievement levels of our students are compared internationally. However, it does tell us that in the United States, students in Kansas are doing pretty well. Problem with that figure is that the United States now ranks 32nd in this measurement of whether children are proficient in math. This simply says that there are 31 countries in the world where our children are being outperformed. If you're like me, I see that as a problem. The economy of our countries has been linked to such an extent that what happens elsewhere affects us. We've heard many stories of businesses who've relocated abroad. There's an entrepreneur in Indiana, in Indianapolis, back home, who owns businesses all over, and he was very excited when he first came up with a business that was successful, and he wanted to hire all the kids, in Indianapolis coming out of school, and that was his great vision, to create these wonderful jobs, be that guy. However, he had businesses in India and in China. He loved the idea of being able to take a young person from Indiana, give them an opportunity to live in India for a few years, did a great job, and then bring all those skills back to the U.S. at his business in the U.S. But he couldn't do it. The students in Indiana were so far behind those students that he found and young people who were applying for jobs in India and China, that economically it was a disaster. And that led him to take action. He's put together a video on this called 2 Million Minutes. And in fact, you can see that video online at 2millionminutes.com. It really chronicles his experience and the despair that he experienced when he discovered what was happening. This quote I found to be very stirring, and so I'd like to pay special attention to this. America faces many challenges, but the enemy I most fear is complacency. We are about to be hit by the full force of global competition. If we continue to ignore the obvious task at hand, while others beat us at our own game, our children and grandchildren will pay the price. We must now establish a sense of urgency. This from the former president of MIT, a man who knows a few things about education in performance levels. For those of us in the room who are my age, maybe a little older, we're pretty set in our careers. We have our skills. We may know fairly well how the rest of our working lives will play out. But for my 2 children who are now in college, for any of our young people who are currently in school, they do not share what we have at this age today, and their futures are certainly uncertain. We can't let this go on anymore. Mediocrity and sticking around with the status quo and saying, well, everything's pretty good. It's good games on Friday and Saturday, and everything's kind of okay. It's just not good enough when the rest of the world has decided that that sense of urgency to perform at high levels and to do great things, when they've decided that that's their future. It was once our future. It is once what we embraced strongly, rigorously as a country and as citizens, that high performance levels and achievement is what we wanted, and nothing else would do. but we have slipped a little bit. We have become, I think, perhaps complacent in our success. Now, other states in the country are embracing this sense of urgency. 2011 we're calling this the year of growth in school choice. I can tell you from my travel schedule and my workload, it was busy. It was very busy. So you'll find that there were 7 states that adopted 8 new school choice programs. There were 8 states plus DC that expanded their existing programs. There are children in 18 states and DC who now enjoy educational options. There are 34 different programs in the states. And Kansas is falling a bit behind the rest. You'll find that states are acting, again, with this great sense of urgency, and there is a certain momentum that, especially this year, has been created, that these successes have come as a result of parents who are understanding that, you know, there's a better way. We can do things a little bit better, and our kids who are not learning today can have that opportunity to succeed. And states are acting on that. And that's what I feel that Kansas can do as well. And Kansas, I think, has always been seen as a leader in good sense, good common sense. Speaking as a person who grew up in Ohio and moved to Indiana when I married, I can tell you that's always been my perception about Kansas. You know, heartland of America, good solid folks here. Well, I still believe that to be true. And I would say, given that, really, you have all the ability and the skills and now, in fact, the motivation to make this happen for your kids. So, how do you do it? You put competition to the test. You update the current system that we have of education. You provide educational options. You ensure that every child has an equal chance to find that learning environment that's going to work for that child. Universal vouchers, education savings accounts, taxpayer scholarships, those are all options that are working in other places. And frankly, when you put control of those education dollars into the hands of parents, well, it's an interesting thing to see what happens. Then suddenly, it's not the state or the school that has the power, it's the parents who do, because they're holding the check in their hands and making that decision about who gets it. Well, funny thing, competition works. People pay attention. There's a question earlier today about parents and how do you get parents more involved in their children's education, particularly if they don't necessarily have the skills to participate very fully in some of the more academic parts of education. What do you do about that? Well, I can tell you from personal experience what I have seen. I have seen parents who have dropped out of school, who are illiterate parents. I have seen parents who are living on the street and who are homeless, but who have accessed a scholarship for their children. And all of a sudden, those parents who previously had been invisible are not invisible anymore. They aren't. There's nothing that drives that participation of parents, and keep in mind that's a two-way street, more than empowering parents. So what do people know about vouchers? Well, you know what you hear from your school leaders, from the unions for teachers, from political parties, from the media. You know what you hear from think tanks like the Kansas Policy Institute. I would suggest to you that the best thing that you can do is get the hard facts. Listen more to the hard facts that you can find through some of the research documents where these people don't really have a dog in this fight. They're analysts. They're presenting the facts. The Kansas Policy Institute, get your facts there. Leave the spin for someone else. This is not a political issue. This is about our kids. It's not a partisan issue. It's just not about that. It's about the future of our country and the power of parents to choose what's best for their kids. So, vouchers. So what's the real story about vouchers? There are some states where people refuse to say the word because the V word has been demonized by primarily the unions for teachers and those who oppose any kind of change in the system, any kind of change in the status quo. However, voucher is a voucher, scholarship is a scholarship. They are taxpayer funded, but they are parent controlled. Parents choose, not the state. And that point, I want to draw your attention to that point because that point, more than anything else, is what drives at the heart of any school choice program. And that is that the choice of school, the choice of learning environment is private. It is a private choice. It is not state directed in any way, shape, or form. It is purely choice, privately. That vouchers can be tailored to meet the needs of your state. So, for example, in Indiana, this year we enacted the nation's largest voucher law. And we decided that in Indiana, first of all, we would need a little bit of time to implement the voucher system in Indiana. And so we phased this in over a period of 3 years. We now have well over 3,000 students who have accessed vouchers just in the last couple months. I believe Dr. Bennett will talk to us a little bit more about that when he speaks. And boy, you're going to love him. We're crazy about him. He is a reformer and he's an advocate for kids more than anyone else I know. But we decided also that the core group of students who would be most likely to access vouchers and where the greatest need was would be in about 60% of the student population in Indiana. So in fact, these vouchers will reach about 60% of the student population in Indiana. That is a level that we expect to continually open till all children in the state have the equal opportunity for a voucher. But that's what we decided for Indiana. That's what would work for us. Other states do it differently. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you can structure a voucher. Vouchers save money for taxpayers. Just one of the things that we all like to hear these days, right? Okay, I think we're all kind of out of money, everyone's struggling, and the thought of having to pay more and more and more, well, we all ask ourselves where the money's going to come from. Vouchers actually save money in this respect. So, for example, if the state is currently paying, say, state and local dollars, maybe $10,000 per student, which is a fairly common average across the country, vouchers are normally tailored to be less than that. So in Indiana, we have two different levels of vouchers. One level of voucher is 90% of the state funding. The other one is at 50% of state funding. But in every case, these vouchers in the first year, you don't see too much of a savings because, again, there's kind of a slow startup period. People need to find out it's available. How do you do it? What do you do? Et cetera. But over time, those savings really add up. And this is true in voucher programs and also in tax credit scholarship programs. Now in Indiana, we've made the decision that the savings that we will realize from those vouchers, that money will go back into the funding formula for all public schools. So it actually provides a method of funding our public schools. So it's kind of a neat formula, and I think it's going to work out pretty beautifully for us. But again, a lot of flexibility there. Vouchers are constitutional. Now, as I just stated a few minutes ago, that component that the choice of schools is private, and how important that is, that's because the U.S. Supreme Court said so. The U.S. Supreme Court in the landmark voucher case called the Zellman case. It was a case that challenged vouchers in Cleveland. In that case, in ruling, in fact, that vouchers are constitutional, the U.S. Supreme Court rested its ruling very squarely on this piece, that when it's parents and not the state making the decision, it can't possibly infringe on any liberty, on any constitutional provision. It is private. The Constitution recognizes, in a way, the sovereignty of the individual, and it's that piece that makes vouchers and tax credit scholarships constitutional. And there's simply no wavering from that in terms of that U.S. Supreme Court decision. It's very strong. So vouchers also, you've heard, improve education for all children, but most especially for your child. There is, first let me say that at our website we have a recent publication called Win-Win. Win-Win is a publication done by one of our senior fellows, and we asked him to put all in one place to compile all of these studies about vouchers and all of their findings, so that in one document you can have all the information in one place. And again, none of those studies were done by us. The only study we did was to pull together all of the studies done by a very diverse group of organizations and highly regarded universities, and we only included those studies that the best researchers regard as being very solid, gold standard research. So you can find the results there. And in fact, as Eric Smith said earlier, that when there is competition, when there is choice involved, suddenly the schools improve. It's funny how that happens. Most recently, last year, Oklahoma passed a voucher bill for children with special needs. And the Tulsa schools objected to that, strongly objected to that, and tried to stop it, tried to not participate in this voucher program. However, there came a point where they realized, yeah, no, that's the law, probably should follow it. But it was very interesting from one of their school board members in public testimony. He said, well, gosh, if these kids with special needs, if they want to leave and they're leaving us, well, maybe we're not doing a good job. I wonder if we could do better. Well, right, yes, you can do better. And so, in fact, in Tulsa, they are now about that process of seeing what they can do better and trying to figure out what they have not been doing to help these students learn. There's nothing real scientific about that, I should hasten to add. A lot of us speak around the country. We're regarded as experts in this area. But truly, isn't this just a matter of common sense? If people don't want what you're selling, well, maybe you should take a look at what you're selling. Maybe you should make it something that people want. It's very simple human relations. Vouchers across America, you'll find that there are vouchers all over. Indiana has now the broadest program in America. Milwaukee, District of Columbia, Oklahoma, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Ohio, Utah, they all have vouchers that are tailored specifically for children with special needs. And when I talk about vouchers being able to be tailored to your needs in Kansas, in those states, they determined that that was their first most pressing need, was to help those students with special needs, and they were just not being served properly. So they were able to act very quickly there. And I expect many of those states to go forward with additional legislation as well. Douglas County, Colorado, revolutionary. One of the highest performing school districts in Colorado decided that their mission as the school district was not just to hang on to their school and keep their jobs. Their mission was to make sure that every child who lived in their district would get a great education, and an education that would work for each child. Well, so then they should have vouchers. So they decided, yeah, they have a great school, but what if that great school is not the right school for some child? Well, shouldn't that child then have the opportunity to go someplace else to get that education and to learn? Well, why not? Why shouldn't they? Why shouldn't that be the mission? Why should that be the point of education, that the point is not that we have public schools, the point is that our children learn. And that is what they embraced in Douglas County, Colorado, and that is what led that public school district to enact vouchers, first in the country. Education savings accounts is kind of the new kid on the block. It's the newest method of funding education, which includes vouchers. I would encourage you to go to the Arizona Department of Education website, where they have a list of facts about the programs, but essentially it operates much the same as a health savings account, where you could use this money today for tuition. Maybe you need mentoring or some additional curriculum for your child, or maybe things are going all right, but what you're really going to need help with is funding college. You could use it for that. It's an extremely flexible plan, and states are taking a look at it, trying to figure out what they might be able to do with it. Dr. Ladner, who is here, was deeply involved in that, and so I would also encourage you to contact him for more information on that. Tax credit scholarships and how they work. Very simply, the law allows then for a group of people, maybe people in your neighborhood, to set up a 501c3. The purpose of the 501c3 is to accept contributions from individuals or businesses, and then those contributions are then distributed in the form of scholarships to anyone who comes asking for them. Now, those individuals or those corporations who give money to those scholarship granting organizations, then they receive a tax credit as a result of making that charitable contribution. That is a tax credit scholarship plan. Now, what's nice about that is also that it can be tailored to meet the needs of the community. So, for example, a scholarship granting organization that is set up, say, in the heart of the inner city. There are some that are designed very specifically to help children who are homeless, who have tremendous challenges that many of us have never experienced. But there may be others that are set up in the suburbs, that are set up in rural America. Scholarship granting organization, rural agricultural area, for example, could be tailored to help those students attend a school that may have a special focus on agribusiness, as an example. People become very creative with scholarship granting organizations, and again, they're just meant to meet the individual needs of the community. Now, I will tell you this also, and this is a bit of a challenge. In all of these educational options, so you have charter schools that Lisa just talked to us about, the voucher program, tax credit scholarships that involve private schools. Well, somebody has to do the hard work of opening a charter school, and which we've heard from one of the questions, it's tough business, opening up a private school. I will tell you, as a person who opened a charter school in Indiana, we were one of the first, we had 11 our first year 10 years ago. It's the hardest thing you will ever do in your life. The money is tight. If you're not an educator, boy, you've got a steep learning curve. You've got to find people. You need help. It's very, very difficult to do. However, there is nothing in your life that you will do that is more rewarding than that. The rewards are absolutely astounding. When you see children, as I have seen in my charter school, who have come to the school, they are 5 years behind in grade level. When we see kids who come in, they're 10th graders, they have 5th grade reading skills, 5th grade math skills. Yep. That's a very desperate situation. You understand very quickly that this child who's just come to you has no future as an adult. With no skills, you're not going to get very far in this world. And we had a very short period of time to turn that around, but that's the mission. And when you see those kids turn around, and all of a sudden they blossom, and this is the cool part, they experience the love of learning. When you see that in these children who had never experienced that before, okay, that's a reward that is far better than the paycheck you get. It's just better than about anything. So I would encourage each of you in this room to consider that. It's the greatest thing you'll ever do. Tax credit scholarships across America, you'll find that, well, they're about everywhere. Arizona has a few different programs. Florida and Pennsylvania are two of the largest programs and the longest standing. And you'll find that in both cases, but most particularly in Florida, the taxpayer savings as a result of that program, they document that. It's been really tremendous. Georgia's tax credit program is universal, any child. Indiana, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, North Carolina is the newest state to adopt a tax credit scholarship program. So as you see, the momentum is there. It keeps coming. So, why Kansas? Well, you'll find that most people don't really know if their states are good or bad. But in this polling that was done by Frank Luntz, who's a national pollster, he found that people regard their schools in much the same manner as they regard their members of Congress. Oh, Congress is terrible. Oh, but my congressman's pretty good. Well, people think the same way about their public schools. Ah, no, public school, yeah, not doing so great. Oh, mine's great. Yeah, mine's great. And I don't think Kansas is any different or unique from that. I mean, this is kind of a phenomenon across the country. Again, though, I urge you to just get the data on where you stand and how you match up, and your eyes will be opened. Now, we took a look at some polling that has been done, and these are different polls that have been done, but we wanted to do a quick comparison of states. And it occurred to me something sort of special about Kansas. You'll find that the percent who favor vouchers is very strong in Kansas. And that holds true no matter what poll you look at. Kansas stands out as being a place where people would favor that kind of educational option. And the same thing with race. You find that African Americans in Kansas very strongly favor this. I might add that this is a trend amongst the African American population, that they do favor this kind of choice. So Kansas is not unique. Now, so is this impossible? A lot of people will tell you, oh, no, you can't do that. The public schools will be harmed. Modern life as we know it will collapse. Terrible things will happen. You'll hear that. It's not true. It's just simply not true. As you can see from the slides, there are programs, voucher programs, tax credit scholarship programs, states across this country, lots of different programs for kids. They're all working. Nothing's collapsed. Everyone's doing just fine. And most especially those kids who really needed the help are getting the help. Those kids who previously were not learning are now learning. That's the key. If you go to our website at Choice.wmv, you'll find a publication that we put together called the ABCs. And the ABCs lists, state by state, all of the different programs, how many kids are participating. Again, it's just the statistics on all the different programs, so you can take a good look at it. Now this year, we decided we needed to do a mid-year update because the adoption of school choice has been so vigorous in this country this year that we needed to do an update. So we have an update which will soon appear on the website, I'm hoping this week. And you can see the list of new programs, expanded programs, it just goes on and on. And I would certainly like to see Kansas added to this list. I'd like to see you be successful for your kids. And certainly, if we can help you in that, give you some of the tools that you need, the research, the data, anything that you need, the Friedman Foundation is certainly very willing to help you. That's what we do. We don't go into a state unless we're called, unless someone asks us for help. And when we're asked, we're more than happy to. Now, you see on the slide that I have the name of Clarissa, and this goes to my point about the most rewarding thing that you'll ever do. Clarissa was a young woman whose story is very similar to stories of children that I have seen personally who have gone to private schools and charter schools both. Clarissa came to my charter school. She's autistic. She's about 10 and a half. Had obsessive compulsive disorder, the hand washing thing. And she had never taken a test. She couldn't read. She couldn't do math. And she was nonverbal. But her parents had tried through the lottery to get their daughter into our school for 3 years running. They were unsuccessful. But then in the 1 year, they won the lottery, got in. And it was their, as they said, it was their last-ditch effort at something that might help their daughter. They had an older son with the same form of autism, and he had, as the doctors had said, crossed over, where the parents were then saving for money to institutionalize this child after they were gone. He would not be able to function as an independent adult. And their daughter was going the same way. Devastating for the family. So when they came to the school, at the school, and again, this is not unique to a lot of independent schools, the teaching was not teaching to a classroom. The teaching was teaching to individuals within a classroom. It's just a different method of teaching. Our class sizes were no smaller than the public schools, saying that way. However, we noticed that very quickly, Clarissa has slowed down on the hand-washing thing. Now, Clarissa, because of this, at her prior school and then also at our school, she had to sit in the back of the classroom because that's where the sink was. But she stopped doing that. And then she started to read. And then she started to learn how to do math. And then she took a test. Did pretty well. But here's the most stunning thing of all. This child, at the age of 11, went home one day from school and said to her parents, "Hey, let me tell you what I did at school today." Now, consider you are the parent. You have never been able to communicate with your child in any way. And at age 11, one day, your child comes home and says, "Hey, let me tell you about my day." That is a stunning experience, life-changing for that child, life-changing for the family. Now, that was when Clarissa was 11. Today, Clarissa was in high school. She refuses to sit in the back of the class. When she sat at the back of the class at her original school, she was labeled incapable of learning, and that was the end of it. They gave her about a half hour of some speech therapy that didn't work, and that was all she got, incapable of learning. However, she was placed into a different learning environment, and there was nothing real special about the learning environment. There was no magic there. There was no special potion or new drugs or anything like that. It was just a different style of learning, and it connected for that child. It allowed her to learn. She is now in high school, and her biggest problem this year was deciding whether she would take 1 or 2 advanced placement test classes. She's taking advanced placement classes now. And she refuses to sit in the back of the room. She is always right in the middle of the room. She's with her peers. She's participating. She has that love of learning just because she found the right learning environment. Now, if we as taxpayers have already made this decision that we're going to fund the education for our children, then shouldn't it be so that they can learn wherever that is? That's the goal, that's the point. And that's what vouchers, school choice, tax credit scholarships allows. So, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure for me to be here today. And if we have time for some questions, I welcome them.
Where do we get the handout?
I have many email addresses for everybody, but if you specifically want something, please make sure that you give me your email address, and they'll also be posted on the website as soon as I get into a computer this afternoon. So they'll be on kansaspolicy.org. It'll be clearly, the Why Not Kansas handouts will be clearly marked, so you can get not just these, but then up-to-date versions of some of the other stuff you actually have the handouts up to. Any questions?
And what's your email address?
It's Leslie, Leslie, @edchoice.org. Choice.org. And I'll also be here the rest of the day, too. So I'm more than happy to speak with any of you.
This example was new to me. The Douglas County Schools in Colorado, that school district, it has individually the authority to grant vouchers to the people within its district.
Well, they're arguing about that right now, but the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
I appreciate that question. Just want to follow up, be sure people understand what's happening in Douglas County. It has been ruled unconstitutional. It has been appealed. Also, Douglas County was going to make $400,000 because they were going to provide 75% tuition payments to 23 private schools, 18 of which were religious, and keep 25%, which is a $400,000 benefit to the school district. Just thought everybody should know that.
Well, that's correct, and I'm glad you brought up the information. The details in that case were that, yes, as I said earlier, that these programs save money in a lot of ways, like we're doing in Indiana. We're turning those savings back into the funding of public education, and they intended to do the same in Douglas County. Of course, the rules and regulations have not been written, and it is being litigated currently. However, after speaking with the attorneys for that case, we have a pretty good feeling that that is going to withstand the courts in Colorado as well. It's brand new, hasn't been done before. It's a bit revolutionary, but what I love about it is that there are people in Colorado who have the guts to stand up and say, "Look, education is just about student learning, and that's it. And we're going to try everything that we can to make sure that that happens." Yes.
When we look at the data in comparison to the United States overseas, and we looked at sort of exclusively at what's going on in the United States, I feel we're kind of like arguing about who's the tallest second grader we have so far to go in comparison to some of those overseas standards. Can you comment on to what extent choice, and this may not be your area of expertise, but to what extent choice programs like these are used in other countries to also drive performance? Are there other examples of nations who do perform consistently better, that you do use choice more consistently and in a broader way?
Yes, yes, there are other countries in the world that have choice. For example, Sweden is my favorite example. In Sweden, the conservatives took over the government in the early 90s, and one of the first things they did was to enact universal vouchers in the country. They lost control of the government, I think it was maybe about 4 years later, and the socialists took control of the government, which is common in Sweden. They kind of go back and forth. But the first thing socialists wanted to do was to get rid of the voucher program. The piece that they didn't like about it was that there were for-profit schools that had sprung up in Sweden, and they just were opposed to for-profit schools. However, when they attempted to get rid of universal vouchers, as the mayor of Stockholm said, once people have freedom and they understand it, they're not giving it up. They are not going to give away that freedom to fully control the education of their children. They didn't, and they were wholly unsuccessful. Sweden really isn't known for revolutions, but as I understand it, Mayor Stockholm said they were darn close when they tried to get rid of the voucher program. So it's working very well for them there. That's not the case in all countries. However, I will share this with you. I was recently at a seminar at Harvard where they actually presented the study, and also some of the people who participated in the study also spoke, including a man who is from China. And he tried to explain to us that replicating what they do in China, China is highly successful with their education. They're highly successful. But he said replicating what they're doing is not what he would recommend for the U.S. It works for them because they have thousands of years of history of doing things in a certain way. We don't have that same history. And so the point he made, that, which I think is very important, the culture of the country and what we accept and how we act and how we think matters to how we go forward in educating our children. So they're successful in their way. We have to be successful in our way. And again, you've heard me say a few different times, very important that anything that you do is tailored to the needs of the children in Kansas. What's right here, what's right culturally for you. And school choice just opens up your opportunities. There, you have the tools then to be able to do that. That's the beauty of school choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.